FM 93.5, AM 1150 WNDB. This story crossed my desk on a Sunday, and I said, I got to find out what happened. It was in the it was in the Washington Post. The FBI overstating hair samples. Are you kidding me? To talk about it, Brian Bouffard, a criminal defense specialist. Fantastic story. How true is this?
Well, it appears to be true, and it appears to be an extremely serious breach of anything that we should all think is appropriate in the criminal justice system. This is a huge story, and it affects thousands of people.
All right. Now, how many people do they think went to jail under what was stretched information? So in other words, they exaggerated the proof from these hair samples that attached this information to somebody they accused of committing a crime?
Exaggerating it, I think, is a kind way to put it. I think maybe a more accurate way to put it is that they lied. They came in, they made juries think that certain things were solid when the science would have told them that it's anything but solid. And we know that many people were affected from the 70s, till about the early aughts, and at least 14 people have died in prison, either from being executed or dying in prison when they were in there partially on this lying testimony from government agents.
Now, to explain to our audience, Brian was a prosecutor, a defender, a Navy JAG officer, and of course a civilian. He's battle-tested criminal trials since graduating from Duke in '97. How is it that you found out about this?
I found out about it the same way everybody else did, and that is through the news this weekend. And again, it's appalling because the government has basically all the cards. They have all the resources. They have all the police officers. They have, all the investigators who are, just at their beck and call. And for some of these folks, that's not enough. Sometimes the government feels like it needs to cheat to win. And I really would hope that all of your listeners and really everybody of conscience would be absolutely appalled by this.
I mean, where do you even begin to try to right this wrong? Did you work for the FBI at one point?
No, I have never worked for the FBI.
Okay. There must be defense attorneys salivating at the opportunity to have another bite at the apple and go after the FBI this time, and maybe even for damage.
Potentially. Unfortunately, when we talk about how the government holds the cards, the government has to give you permission to sue it. So the first thing they would have to breach would be governmental immunity. I would hope that a judge would grant that and allow suits to go forward. I do think one of the problems, though, is that even though this is extremely compelling evidence, if you're sitting on a jury panel and you're trying to determine whether somebody's guilty or not guilty, hair fiber analysis from a scientist standing up there on the witness stand and telling you, if this guy was there, his twin brother, because the hair matches. That's extremely compelling evidence, and that can certainly be the kind of evidence that in a close case could push it the government's way. The big question is going to be, is there other evidence in any individual case? What was the strength of the other evidence, and would a reasonable jury have gone ahead and found him guilty if this testimony had not been offered?
This is unbelievable. Apparently there are over 2,000 cases where there were convictions on hair samples. There are 27 people that, Brian, are on death row as a result of this?
Well, the stat I'm sure there are. And the more appalling stat to me is the fact that we've executed people. We have executed people. We have taken their lives based in part on lying government agents.
I'm probably my public defender in this area, who used to be a prosecutor as well. Jim Purdy is probably listening to this, wondering, I mean, it doesn't stop, I'm sure, at the FBI. There could be other agencies that are involved. Maybe, Brian?
Absolutely. And that's the thing. You just don't know. And I really do have to take my hat off to the Department of Justice because, even though they have been forced to admit this, at least they're admitting it. We've seen issues with government agencies that won't admit what's right in front of their face. So at least the government and the defense community are in agreement that this has happened and that this is absolutely inappropriate, to use a very nice term, and hopefully everybody's going to ultimately get justice. But it's going to take a great deal of time, and people are going to still be sitting in jail awaiting their cases being reviewed. And in the meantime, the criminal justice system is still getting thousands of new cases every single day. So it's a huge mess, and it'll be interesting to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, because you've got first the whole question of sovereign immunity. Then you've got a question of, if it isn't complete for everybody, does the government have to pay damages to families in which they executed people wrongly? Are states going to be culpable as co-conspirators on this?
Well, all these are open questions. One of the most important questions will be, did the prosecutors involved understand that they were putting on flawed testimony? In other words, did they understand hair analysis maybe better than the FBI quote-unquote expert did? And should they have been able to see that some of this testimony was being grotesquely overstated? And that's an impossible question to answer, because as you say, we've got 2,000 plus of these cases to deal with.
This is scary too, because there's already people.
It is, and it should be, and everybody ought to be scared that this is the government that we not only have elected but continue to elect. And bear in mind, this has been going on since the 70s. So we've had Republican administrations and we've had Democratic administrations, and people need to realize that things like this don't change. Things like this are part of the status quo, and the only way to fix it is to elect people who will fix it.
Now, I believe one of the things I'm learning is our legislature is taking up the issue of whether to change the rules on the death penalty. Other states require a unanimous vote of a sentencing jury. In Florida, it's only a majority. And so,
right, and in Alabama, a judge can ignore a jury's recommendation to not give a death penalty, and the judge could impose the death penalty on his own.
Really?
Yeah, it's scary, and it's certainly scary anytime you're talking about a powerful force that has the ability to lock you in a cage. But this same powerful force has the ability to take your life, and it's a conversation that we need to continue to have in our country. Do we want our government, who frankly can't deliver the mail on time, do we want them to have the power of life and death over our citizens?
Oh, man. Is it possible that the Attorney General could somehow order, or from some kind of call from Washington, a stay on anybody who could be executed that may have linkage to a hair sample that led to their conviction until we get this straightened out?
The Attorney General doesn't have the authority to issue the stay, but he can certainly support and advocate for a stay. And in that instance, I would certainly hope that that various courts would listen to that. The other problem is that just because this is FBI testimony does not mean that all these cases were federal. These are state cases as well that sometimes can utilize federal resources to testify. So I haven't seen a breakdown of where all these cases at issue are from, but there's going to be a morass of jurisdictional issues to deal with, and there will be some states and some state governors who frankly won't see a problem with it, and that's yet another thing that ought to concern us all.
Tell us a little bit about your practice of law these days. What are you doing?
I'm a criminal defense attorney. I'm based out of Fort Worth, Texas, so I do civilian criminal defense in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I also do military courts-martial defense worldwide, so I literally travel all over the world representing people facing court-martial.
Am I correct, Brian, that Texas, just through its history, has put more people to death on the death penalty, and they have a lower threshold that you have to meet to be put to death?
There's not necessarily a lower threshold here, but yes, we are a leading killer of inmates. And again, I know as I say that language, and I know that if somebody had a loved one killed by some criminal and he was given the death penalty, and I can't imagine that, and I don't want to make light of that. But at the same time, these people are citizens, and these people deserve the rule of law, just like we all do. And I personally have come down on the issue of I don't feel that my government is competent enough to get it right 100% of the time. And you can fix it if somebody's, in prison for life. You can't fix it when you've killed them. And that's what we have here in 14 cases.
I also know, as we were speaking, that Texas executed a mentally ill man who shot a police officer, I think, this month.
Yeah, there's so many stories just like that out of our state. It's, I'm proud to be from Texas. My family's from Texas, but nothing's perfect. And this is one of the things about my state that I'm embarrassed by and absolutely don't support.
One more question in this line, and that is, can you tell me anything about the Texas Innocence Project, what that is?
Well, the Texas Innocence Project is an offshoot of National Innocence Project and state innocence projects all over the country. And they're really doing good work looking into cases in which, the prototypical Innocence Project case is somebody who was convicted before they really focused and understood how to apply DNA evidence in cases. And so people could be convicted and evidence still, in custody that could be tested and had never been tested. So, for example, somebody could be convicted of rape, and the rape kit could now be tested and run DNA, and it comes back to somebody else. And, clearly that's the kind of thing that a juror should have heard and should have been able to evaluate. And so the Innocence Project goes in and reviews these cases to try to see, are people in jail justly, or are some people in jail unjustly?
All right. Well, Brian, thank you so much for chatting with us about this today. I didn't even know about this until yesterday. I can only imagine the horror of families who have lost family members because of what now was a thin case that was made worse by a government agency that attempted to manipulate the system. I don't know any other way to put it, Brian. Do you?
No, and I don't think there is any other way to put it. And when you measure that up against what we're seeing in the news, it almost seems like every day or every week we have news stories of police brutality. We have stories of people who we ought to be able to trust, who nevertheless manipulate our system to the detriment of the citizen accused. And we all have to stand up against that.
Brian, is the FBI issuing a statement, or are they going to do anything to clean this up, or what?
I don't want to say for sure that they have or haven't, because I'm not sure. But again, the Department of Justice is certainly clear on the fact that they agree that this has occurred. They agree that it's wrong, and they're, I certainly hope, going to help right that wrong.
And I haven't seen anything that indicates if more of these people were black as opposed to white either.
That's a great question, and it's sad that has to even be a concern. But obviously, in our country today, even in 2015, clearly it is a concern. So I'm going to be very interested to see those statistics, and I hope that they are brought forward.
Brian Bouffard, out of Texas, joining us live today on WNDB. Brian, thank you so much for the time.
Mark, thank you. Anytime.